The massive space station called Concordia Prime floated in the darkness between stars. Inside its gleaming halls, representatives from 847 different alien species gathered for an emergency meeting. The air hummed with tension as beings of all shapes and sizes took their places in the great circular chamber. At the center of the room stood a human woman named Elena Vasquez. She wore a simple blue uniform with Earth's flag on her shoulder. Her dark hair was pulled back, and her brown eyes showed no fear as she faced the assembled aliens. She was Earth's ambassador to the Galactic Council, and today she was in trouble. Chancellor Vorth Ka rose from his seat on the high platform. He was a tall, gray-skinned alien with 4 arms and eyes like black diamonds. His voice echoed through the chamber as he spoke. "Ambassador Vasquez," he began, his words careful and formal. "We have called this meeting to address humanity's recent actions. Your species has been part of our galactic community for only 3 years. Yet in this short time, you have shown a disturbing pattern of behavior." Elena stood perfectly still. She did not speak or move. She simply waited. "The incident at Kepler Station troubles us greatly," Vorth Ka continued. "Your human fleet encountered pirates from the Ravager clans. These criminals attacked your cargo ships and killed your people. We understand your anger, but what happened next goes against everything we believe." Murmurs rippled through the chamber. Many aliens nodded their agreement with the Chancellor's words. "The pirates tried to surrender," Vorth Ka said, his voice growing louder. "They sent the proper signals. They offered to negotiate. They followed the ancient laws of warfare that all civilized species honor. And yet your Admiral Chen ordered their complete destruction. Every ship, every life, no mercy, no prisoners." The chamber fell silent. Elena's expression did not change. "This is not how civilized beings conduct war," said Ambassador Threx from the Hegemony Worlds. His blue skin flushed darker with emotion. "All sentient life has value. Even criminals have rights. Even enemies deserve a chance to surrender and face justice." "The pirates killed 300 human civilians," Elena said quietly. It was the first time she had spoken since entering the chamber. "They recorded the murders. They sent the videos to other ships as a warning." "That does not excuse what your people did," Chancellor Vorth Ka replied. "Revenge is not justice. Massacre is not warfare. We have rules that prevent such horrors." Elena took a slow breath. For a moment, something dark flickered in her eyes. "You want to know why we destroyed them all?" she asked. "You want to know why we did not negotiate?" "Yes," Vorth Ka said. "Help us understand." "We tried negotiating with killers once," Elena said. Her voice was soft but carried clearly through the silent chamber. "We learned better." "What do you mean?" asked Ambassador Kylan from the peaceful Dorati worlds. "We call it the silence," Elena said. "It happened before we joined your council. Before we knew there were rules about being nice to monsters." She paused and looked around the chamber. Every alien face was focused on her. "We made a mistake," Elena continued. "We thought that because something could talk, it could be reasoned with. We thought that because something was intelligent, it could choose to be good. We were wrong." "Explain," Chancellor Vorth Ka demanded. Elena shook her head. "That information is classified, but I will tell you this much. We learned that some enemies do not negotiate in good faith. Some enemies see mercy as weakness. Some enemies will take everything you give them and then kill you anyway." The chamber erupted in angry voices. Aliens stood and shouted at Elena in dozens of languages. They called her barbaric. They called humans savages. They demanded that Earth be expelled from the council. Elena waited for the noise to die down. When it was quiet again, she spoke. "You have your rules," she said. "You have your laws about civilized warfare. You negotiate with pirates and terrorists and murderers because that is what civilized people do. We understand this. We respect your choice. Then why do you refuse to follow these laws? Vorth-Ka asked. Because we have learned that there is something more important than being civilized, Elena replied. There is something more valuable than our reputation or your approval. And what is that? Elena's eyes grew cold. Making sure that certain kinds of evil never get a second chance to hurt innocent people. The chamber fell silent again. Many aliens looked uncomfortable. They whispered among themselves in worried voices. Chancellor Vorth-Ka stood taller. The Council has made its decision. Humanity must conform to galactic standards of warfare and diplomacy. You must follow our laws regarding prisoner treatment and surrender protocols. You must negotiate with hostile forces according to established procedures. And if we refuse? Elena asked. Then Earth will face sanctions, trade restrictions, possible expulsion from the Council. Your species will be isolated from galactic civilization. Elena nodded slowly. We understand your position, Chancellor. Then you will comply? Elena met his gaze without blinking. We hope you never understand ours. The words sent a chill through the chamber. There was something in Elena's voice that made even the largest aliens feel small, something that spoke of terrible knowledge and hard-won wisdom. Is that a threat? Vorth-Ka demanded. No, Elena said. It is a prayer. She turned and walked toward the exit. Her footsteps echoed in the silent chamber. At the door, she paused and looked back. When the next real monsters come, she said, remember this conversation. Remember that we offered to stand between them and your children. Remember that you told us to be civilized instead. Then she was gone, leaving behind a room full of worried aliens and the growing feeling that humanity knew something the rest of the galaxy did not. 6 months had passed since the warning. The Galactic Council continued its business as usual, dealing with trade disputes and border conflicts. Most aliens had forgotten about the strange human ambassador and her dark words. They had more immediate concerns. Then the sensors at the edge of the galaxy began screaming. Admiral Zephys of the Council Defense Fleet stood in the command center of the massive station, watching the incoming data with growing horror. His tentacles trembled as he read the reports. His blue skin had turned pale gray with fear. How many ships? He asked his aide, hoping he had misunderstood. Over 10,000 confirmed contacts, sir, the young officer replied. More appearing every hour. They match the old records perfectly. Admiral Zephys closed all 4 of his eyes. He had hoped never to see this day. His grandfather had fought in the last war against these monsters. The stories still gave him nightmares. Send an emergency signal to all Council worlds, he ordered. Priority 1. The Devaki have returned. The name spread through the galaxy like wildfire. On 1,000 worlds, beings who had never heard of the Devaki learned their history from emergency broadcasts. The ancient enemy had come back. 2,000 years ago, the Devaki swarm had swept through this part of space like a plague. They were not alive as most beings understood life. They were something between machine and flesh, something that consumed entire worlds and left behind only empty rocks floating in space. The last war had cost the galaxy dearly. 200 species had joined together to fight them. Billions had died. Entire star systems had been sacrificed to stop their advance. In the end, the combined fleets had barely managed to drive the Devaki back into the dark spaces between galaxies. Now they had returned, and they were stronger than before. Emergency sessions began immediately on Concordia Prime. Representatives rushed to their ships and traveled through hyperspace to attend the crisis meetings. Within 3 days, the Great Chamber was full once again. Chancellor Vorth-Ka stood at the center of the room, his 4 arms shaking slightly as he spoke. The Devaki fleet approaches the outer rim, he announced. Long-range scans show they will reach the first inhabited systems in 2 weeks. We must act quickly. What do they want? asked Ambassador Kylan, though her voice suggested she already knew the answer. The same thing they wanted before, replied Admiral Zephys. Everything. They consume entire worlds. They break down all organic matter into raw materials for their ships. They leave nothing alive. Have we tried to communicate with them? Asked Ambassador Threx. Yes, Admiral Zephys said. Our best xenopsychologists established contact yesterday. The chamber waited in tense silence. They offered us the same terms they always offer. Surrender our young. Surrender our weak. They will grant quick deaths to those they consider worthy. The rest will be processed slowly. Fear filled the air. Many aliens began talking at once, their voices rising in panic. What about negotiation? Called out Ambassador Morim from the core worlds. Surely we can reach some agreement? Perhaps territorial concessions? We could evacuate the Outer Rim worlds and let them have those systems. What if we offered tribute? Suggested another voice. Resources? Technology? There must be something they want besides death. The debate continued for hours. Some aliens proposed surrender of specific worlds to save others. Some suggested offering up their criminals and prisoners as a sacrifice. Others wanted to try diplomatic solutions that had worked with other enemies. Through all of this, the human delegation sat in silence. Elena Vasquez was there, as was Admiral Sarah Chen, the commander of Earth's small but growing fleet. They listened to every proposal without speaking. They watched the other species argue and plan and hope for a peaceful solution. Chancellor Vorthka finally noticed their silence. Ambassador Vasquez, he said, we have not heard from humanity. What is your government's position on these negotiations? Elena stood slowly. The chamber grew quiet. We don't negotiate, she said simply. The words hit the room like a physical blow. Aliens stared at her in shock and disbelief. Excuse me, Vorthka said. Admiral Chen rose beside Elena. She was a small woman with gray hair and scars on her hands from years of military service. Her voice was calm and steady. Humanity's position is clear, she said. We do not negotiate with the Devaki. We do not bargain with them. We do not make deals with them. That's madness, shouted Ambassador Threx. They have 10,000 ships. They've destroyed entire civilizations. You cannot simply refuse to talk to them. Watch us, Elena said. The chamber erupted in angry voices. Aliens stood and pointed at the humans. They called them fools and suicidal idiots. They demanded that humanity participate in the diplomatic process. Chancellor Vorthka raised his arms for silence. This is not optional, he said to the humans. All council members must participate in negotiations. This is galactic law. Then change the law, Admiral Chen replied. We will not allow humanity to jeopardize these talks with your primitive attitudes, Vorthka said angrily. If you refuse to cooperate, we will expel Earth from the Council immediately. Elena and Admiral Chen looked at each other. Elena nodded slightly. You're welcome to try diplomacy, Admiral Chen said to the assembled aliens. Take all the time you need. Hold all the meetings you want. Make all the deals that help you sleep at night. She paused and looked around the chamber. But when you're done talking, she continued, you'll find us at the front lines. You cannot fight them alone, protested Admiral Zephys. They destroyed the Korth Empire. They wiped out the Valdris Federation. No single species can stand against them. Maybe not, Elena said. But we're going to try anyway. Why? Vorthka demanded. Why throw away your lives for nothing? Elena's expression grew sad. Because someone has to, she said. Because if nobody stands against monsters, then monsters win. Because we learned long ago that some things are worth dying for. She turned toward the exit. You have your negotiations, she called back to the chamber. We have our war. Admiral Chen followed her out. Behind them, the council dissolved into chaos as aliens argued about what to do next. Outside in the corridor, Elena stopped walking. "Think we'll survive this one?" Admiral Chen asked quietly. Elena looked out through the station's huge windows at the stars beyond. "Probably not," she admitted. "But maybe the galaxy will remember why we tried." While the Galactic Council continued their desperate negotiations with the approaching Devaki swarm, human ships began moving toward the outer systems. Admiral Chen had ordered every available vessel to the front lines, ignoring direct commands from the Council to stand down. This open defiance shocked the galaxy. News broadcasts carried reports of human fleets heading into certain death. Alien commentators called it suicide. Military experts said humanity would be destroyed within hours of first contact. But something else was happening. Deep in Earth's classified archives, files were being unsealed. Ambassador Elena had finally received permission to tell the galaxy about the silence. She stood once again in the great chamber of Concordia Prime. This time, however, the mood was different. The aliens were no longer angry. They were confused and afraid. "You want to understand why we refused to negotiate," Elena said to the assembled representatives. "You want to know why we would rather die than talk. I can show you." The lights dimmed, and a holographic display appeared in the center of the chamber. It showed Earth as it had been 15 years ago, before humanity joined the galactic community. "This is the story of our first contact with alien life," Elena began. "This is the story of why we learned to fear negotiation more than death." The display changed to show a massive alien ship approaching Earth. It was sleek and beautiful, covered in elegant designs that spoke of advanced civilization. "They called themselves the Kythera Syndicate," Elena continued. "They had ruled 12 star systems for over 300 years. They were slavers, but they were also sophisticated diplomats. They knew how to talk." The image shifted to show scenes of first contact. Human leaders shaking hands with tall, graceful aliens, smiling faces on both sides, hope in human eyes. "They offered us standard terms," Elena said. "Surrender 30% of our population for what they called processing, and the rest would be allowed to live under Kythera rule. They said it was a generous offer. They said other species had paid much more." The aliens in the chamber stirred uncomfortably. This sounded familiar. It was how many civilized species had been integrated into galactic society over the centuries. "Our United Nations government refused, of course," Elena continued. "But the Kythera were patient. They said they understood our concerns. They offered to negotiate." The display showed meeting rooms full of humans and aliens, documents being passed back and forth, maps being drawn and redrawn. "The talks went on for months," Elena said. "We offered them trade agreements. We promised to share our technology. We even offered to give them some of our outer colonies. The Kythera seemed reasonable. They made counteroffers. They compromised. They acted like partners working toward a solution." Chancellor Vorth-Ka leaned forward in his seat. "What happened?" Elena's voice grew quieter. "They needed to demonstrate their power, to show us what resistance would cost. So they attacked our lunar research station." The display changed to show the moon, a beautiful white sphere covered in domed cities and research facilities. Ships moving peacefully between Earth and the lunar surface. "The station was called Tranquility," Elena said. 15,000 people lived and worked there. Scientists, engineers, families, children who had been born on the moon and never seen Earth. The image showed Kythera ships surrounding the station, the elegant aliens making announcements about taking hostages to ensure good faith in negotiations. "The Kythera were very professional about it," Elena continued. "They explained that the civilians would be well treated during talks. They said this was standard procedure. They even allowed food and medical supplies to be delivered." The chamber was completely silent now. Every alien watched the display with growing dread. "The negotiations started again," Elena said. "This time we gave them everything they wanted. Rare earth elements from our asteroid mines, our most advanced computer designs, even volunteer populations, people who agreed to go with the Kythera to save others." The display showed human ships delivering cargo to the elegant alien vessels, documents being signed, Kythera diplomats expressing satisfaction with human cooperation. "It took 6 weeks to finalize everything," Elena said. "The Kythera seemed pleased. They said Earth had shown wisdom and maturity. They promised to honor the agreement and spare our world." She paused and looked around the chamber. "Then they left the solar system, all their ships, all their diplomats. They took our tribute and our volunteers and disappeared into space." "But that's good," said Ambassador Kylan. "You reached an agreement. You saved your world." Elena's smile was terrible to see. "Watch," she said. The display focused on the lunar station, humans working at their jobs, children playing in low-gravity playgrounds, families eating dinner together in the station's restaurants. Then, without warning, they all stopped moving. In the span of 3 seconds, 15,000 people simply died. No explosion, no visible cause, they just collapsed where they stood and never moved again. The chamber erupted in horrified gasps. Several aliens covered their eyes or looked away from the display. "They called it the Silence Protocol," Elena said, her voice now completely emotionless. "A bioweapon that kills instantly and painlessly. They activated it from their ships as they left our solar system." The display showed the aftermath. Empty corridors, bodies lying peacefully where they had fallen, children still holding their toys. "The message arrived 6 hours later," Elena continued. "A recording from the Kythera Admiral. He explained that this was their standard procedure. They always killed the hostages after negotiations were complete. It was a demonstration of good faith, showing other species what cooperation with the Kythera would ultimately bring." The chamber was completely silent except for the sound of several aliens being sick. "The Admiral thanked us for the tribute," Elena said. "He said our volunteers would serve the Syndicate well before they too were processed. He promised that Earth's final day would be quick and merciful, just like the lunar station." She gestured, and the display changed to show Earth's response. "We had 72 hours before the Kythera returned for final harvest," Elena said. "Our leaders held emergency sessions. Our military made desperate plans. Our scientists worked around the clock." The image showed human ships launching from Earth, small, crude vessels compared to the elegant Kythera fleet. But they moved with purpose and desperate determination. "When the Kythera came back, they found something unexpected," Elena continued. "They found a species that had learned the real lesson of negotiation with killers." The display showed the battle, human ships throwing themselves at the Kythera vessels with no regard for losses, ramming attacks, suicide runs, nuclear weapons detonated at point-blank range. "It took 4 days," Elena said. "We lost 60% of our fleet. But when it was over, every Kythera ship in our system was debris." The image shifted to show human vessels chasing Kythera ships across space, tracking them to their home systems, the elegant aliens pleading for mercy as their worlds burned. "The Syndicate tried to negotiate," Elena said. "They offered to release our people. They promised to leave human space forever. They said they had learned their lesson." She looked directly at Chancellor Vorth-Ka. "We didn't listen. Within 6 months, every Kythera world was a smoking ruin. The Syndicate that had terrorized star systems for centuries was extinct, not defeated, not driven away, completely erased from existence." The display faded to black. "That is why we don't negotiate with killers," Elena said. "Because we learned that negotiation with monsters isn't diplomacy. It's collaboration. It's giving evil more time to perfect its plans." The chamber remained silent for a long time. Finally, Chancellor Vorthka spoke. "The Devaki are not the Kithara." "No," Elena agreed. "They're worse. The Kithara at least pretended to care about their own survival. The Devaki don't even do that." "You cannot destroy the Devaki like you destroyed the Syndicate," Admiral Zephys protested. "There are too many of them." Elena nodded. "You're probably right. But we're going to try anyway." "Why?" demanded Ambassador Threx. "Why throw your lives away for nothing?" Elena's eyes grew hard. "Because 15,000 people died on Luna because we believed that monsters could be reasoned with," she said. "Because we swore that would never happen again. Because some things are worth more than survival." She turned toward the exit. "Keep negotiating if it makes you feel better," she called back. "But remember, every minute you spend talking is another minute the Devaki get closer to your children." The Galactic Council's negotiations with the Devaki swarm continued for 3 more days. Diplomatic teams sent message after message, trying to find some compromise that might save lives. The ancient enemies responded with patience that felt more like mockery. Meanwhile, human ships took position at the Kepler defense line, a series of fortified stations marking the edge of Council space. Admiral Chen commanded the fleet from her flagship, a massive battleship called the Remembrance. The name was painted in bold letters along its hull, below a memorial listing 15,000 names. What the galaxy witnessed next challenged everything they thought they knew about civilized warfare. The first Devaki scouts appeared on long-range sensors exactly when predicted. They were strange ships that seemed to grow rather than being built, their hulls covered in patterns that hurt to look at directly. As they approached the human line, they broadcast the traditional surrender frequencies. Admiral Chen's response was immediate and brutal. Every human ship opened fire at maximum range, pouring energy and projectiles into space without warning or ultimatum. The Devaki scouts died in brilliant explosions before they could react. "Admiral!" The communication came from the Council monitoring station. "Those ships were trying to surrender." Chen's reply was broadcast to every ship in both fleets. "We don't accept surrenders from Devaki." What followed was unlike anything the galaxy had seen before. Human tactics ignored every convention of civilized warfare. They didn't target military installations while sparing civilian areas. They didn't offer quarter to damaged vessels. They didn't follow any of the ancient protocols that governed conflict between intelligent species. Instead, they fought with a completeness that horrified Council observers. When a Devaki bioship was disabled and drifting, human vessels would close in and reduce it to atoms. When enemy forces attempted to retreat, human fighters would pursue them into deep space and hunt them down one by one. The battle for Proxima Station became the stuff of nightmares. The station was a civilian facility housing 2 million beings from dozens of species. It served as a trade hub and refugee center, clearly marked with all the symbols that should have protected it from attack. When the Devaki broke through the human defense line and surrounded the station, everyone expected Admiral Chen to negotiate for the civilians' safety. Instead, she ordered the station's fusion reactors overloaded. The explosion lit up half the system. Proxima Station vanished in a miniature star that consumed everything within 100,000 kilometers. 2 million civilians died instantly, along with the 50,000 human crew members and the entire Devaki attack force. Council observers were speechless. They sent frantic messages demanding an explanation. Admiral Chen's reply was brief. "Acceptable losses." "You murdered 2 million innocents," came the horrified response from Chancellor Vorthka. "No," Chen replied. "We saved 2 billion. The Devaki would have processed those civilians and used their biomass to build more ships. Now they can't." The systematic destruction continued. Human forces rode off every civilian in the danger zone and fought as if every enemy vessel had to be completely destroyed rather than simply driven away. They turned their own colonies into traps, evacuating populations and then detonating the planets when Devaki forces landed to feed. For the first time in their species' history, the Devaki began to show something that might have been fear. Their bioships started avoiding direct confrontation with human fleets. They attempted to go around the defense lines instead of through them. The humans responded by tracking them into dark space and fighting running battles through asteroid fields and nebulae. What had begun as a territorial defense became a campaign of extermination that spanned entire star systems. Then something unprecedented happened. The Devaki attempted to negotiate. Their message came through standard diplomatic channels translated into every galactic language. Younger species shows unexpected resistance. Devaki Collective offers withdrawal to previous territories in exchange for cessation of hostilities. The message was broadcast throughout Council space. Every species heard it. Many felt hope for the first time since the crisis began. Admiral Chen's response was also broadcast across all channels. Her words were calm and clear. "We don't negotiate with killers." The human fleet continued its advance. Devaki forces found themselves being systematically cornered and destroyed. When they tried to scatter, human ships split into hunter-killer groups that pursued individual vessels across dozens of systems. Council observers watched in fascination and horror as humanity waged war without mercy or restraint. There was something almost inhuman about their efficiency. They moved like a machine designed for one purpose: the complete elimination of the enemy. "Why won't you accept their surrender?" Chancellor Vorth-Ka demanded during one of many emergency communications. Admiral Chen looked tired. Her hair had gone completely gray in the weeks since fighting began. Dark circles ringed her eyes. "Because they don't really surrender," she said. "They retreat. They regroup. They wait for us to lower our guard, and then they come back stronger. But the diplomatic protocols—" "Your protocols assume your enemy wants to live," Chen interrupted. "The Devaki don't care about survival. They care about consumption. Give them a chance to escape and they'll spend the next 1,000 years growing stronger while your children live in fear." "You cannot hunt down every single ship!" Chen's smile was grim. "Watch us!" The pursuit lasted 3 more months. Human fleets followed fleeing Devaki vessels into the dark spaces between galaxies. They established temporary bases on asteroids and dead worlds to continue the hunt. They used every trick of war they had ever learned and invented new ones as they went. The galaxy watched with growing amazement as reports came in. Another Devaki bioship destroyed. Another cluster eliminated. Another hiding place discovered and cleansed. The humans were keeping their word. They were hunting down every single enemy vessel, no matter how long it took or how far they had to travel. Finally, 3 months and 4 days after the first Devaki scout had appeared on sensors, Admiral Chen sent a message to Concordia Prime. It was brief and to the point. Threat eliminated, all Devaki vessels destroyed, no survivors. The silence that followed lasted for hours. Then came the verification reports. Long-range sensors sweeping the galaxy, deep space monitoring stations checking for any remaining signals. Nothing. The Devaki swarm that had terrorized the galaxy for millennia was gone. Completely. Permanently. But the cost was becoming clear as human casualty reports arrived. Humanity had lost 2.3 billion citizens, nearly 30% of their total population. Entire colony worlds had been sacrificed to stop Devaki strongholds. The human military was in ruins, their industrial capacity devastated. Yet when asked if they regretted their actions, Admiral Chen's response was simple. "We did what was necessary. We paid what was required. The galaxy's children can sleep safely now." The Council finally understood. Humans didn't fight wars to win territory or resources. They fought wars to end them, completely and permanently, no matter the cost to themselves. It was a terrifying kind of mercy. In the weeks following the complete destruction of the Devaki swarm, reports began flooding into Concordia Prime from across human space. The numbers were staggering and difficult to believe. Earth itself had lost 600 million people. The Luna colonies were gone completely. Evacuated populations sacrificed when human forces detonated the moon to stop a Devaki nest from growing. Mars was now an airless rock. Its atmosphere burned away in the fighting. The outer colonies were either destroyed or so damaged they would take decades to rebuild. Chancellor Vorth Ka stood in his private office, reading report after report of human losses. His 4 hands trembled as he processed the scale of destruction. Humanity had paid a price that no species in galactic history had ever willingly accepted. And yet, they had won. A soft chime announced a visitor. His aide entered, followed by a figure that made the Chancellor's breath catch. It was Admiral Chen, but she looked like a ghost of herself. Her hair was completely white now, her face lined with exhaustion and grief. She moved slowly like someone carrying an enormous weight. "Admiral?" Vorth Ka said, rising from his desk. "I thank you for coming." Chen nodded and took the offered seat. For a moment, neither spoke. "I need to understand," the Chancellor said finally. "How could your people accept such losses? How could they choose to sacrifice so much?" Chen looked out through the office's wide windows at the stars beyond. "Because we learned what happens when you don't." "But the cost was acceptable," Chen finished. "Would you like to know what it bought?" She gestured to a small device, and a holographic display appeared between them. It showed a star chart of the galaxy, with thousands of inhabited worlds marked in soft blue light. "Every one of those lights represents billions of lives," Chen said quietly. "Families, children playing in schoolyards, lovers holding hands, artists creating beauty, scientists discovering wonders." The display zoomed in to show specific worlds, cities full of aliens going about their daily lives, parks where young beings played games, schools where children of dozens of species learned together. "The Devaki would have consumed all of this," Chen continued. "Every world, every life. They would have processed entire civilizations into raw materials for more ships. They would have turned this galaxy into a graveyard." Vorth Ka stared at the peaceful scenes. "But surely some accommodation could have been reached?" "No." Chen's voice was firm. "The Devaki don't negotiate in good faith. They don't want territory or resources. They want everything dead so they can harvest it. There is no compromise with that kind of hunger." The display changed to show images from the war. Human ships fighting desperate battles. Colonies evacuating their children to safety. Ordinary people making impossible choices. "My daughter was on Proxima Station," Chen said suddenly. Vorth Ka's eyes widened. Proxima Station, the civilian facility Chen herself had ordered destroyed. "She was a teacher," Chen continued. "She worked with refugee children, helping them adjust to life in council space. She loved her job. She loved those kids." The Chancellor couldn't speak. "When the Devaki broke through our lines and surrounded the station, she sent me a message," Chen said. Her voice remained steady, but tears ran down her face. "She said she understood what had to be done. She said to give the order." The holographic display showed the moment of the station's destruction, the brilliant flash that had consumed 2 million lives. "I killed my own daughter to stop monsters from using her to kill other children," Chen said. "Do you understand that? Do you understand the kind of calculation we've learned to make?" Vorth Ka felt sick. "Admiral, I'm so sorry." "Don't be sorry," Chen interrupted. "Be grateful. Be grateful that someone was willing to make that choice so your grandchildren never have to." She stood and moved to the window, looking out at the peaceful space around the station. Every human who died in this war made the same calculation, she said. Our lives against the galaxy's future. Our families against everyone else's families, and we chose everyone else. But why? Vorthka asked. Why sacrifice so much for species you barely know? Chen turned back to him. Because we learned something about evil, real evil, the kind that wears a pleasant face and speaks of reasonable compromises while sharpening its knives. She sat down again and leaned forward. Evil depends on good people choosing comfort over courage. It depends on civilization being too civilized to fight back. It counts on mercy and negotiation and the benefit of the doubt. The display changed to show images from humanity's first contact war against the Cathera. The elegant aliens with their sophisticated diplomacy and hidden cruelty. The Cathera taught us that some enemies will take everything you give them and then kill you anyway, Chen said. They taught us that negotiation with true monsters is just giving them time to perfect their plans. So you refuse to negotiate with anyone? No, Chen replied. We negotiate with beings who negotiate in good faith. We trade with peaceful species. We work with civilizations that want to build instead of destroy. The display showed scenes of human diplomats working with other species, trade agreements, cultural exchanges, cooperative research projects. But when we encounter something like the Kithara or the Devaki, something that sees mercy as weakness and peace as an opportunity for slaughter, we respond differently. You destroy them completely. We eliminate the threat permanently, Chen corrected, because we've learned that half measures against true evil just create more suffering later. Vorthka was quiet for a long time, processing what he had heard. The Council owes humanity a great debt, he said finally. Chen shook her head. The Council owes us nothing. We didn't do this for gratitude or payment. We did it because it was necessary. Then what do you want from us? Chen's expression grew sad. Just remember what we paid. Remember it when the next monsters come. Remember it when someone tells you that everything can be solved with words. She stood to leave. And remember this, she added. Sometimes the only way to preserve civilization is to refuse to be civilized. In the months that followed, the galaxy slowly came to terms with what humanity had done. Memorials were built on 1,000 worlds honoring the human sacrifice. Children across the galaxy learned the story of the species that chose extinction over surrender to evil. The Galactic Council added a new section to their constitution, the Human Doctrine. It stated that when facing absolute evil, mercy could become collaboration, negotiation could become surrender, and sometimes the preservation of life required the acceptance of death. But more than laws or monuments, the galaxy learned something deeper. They learned that there were beings willing to pay any price to protect innocent life. They learned that courage sometimes wore the face of terrible necessity. They learned that love could be fierce enough to choose destruction over compromise. Most importantly, they learned why humans didn't negotiate with killers. And they learned to be grateful that someone was willing to bear that burden. Years later, when new threats emerged from the dark spaces between stars, the galaxy's response was different. They still tried diplomacy first, still hoped for peaceful solutions. But when faced with enemies who saw kindness as weakness, they remembered the human lesson. Sometimes the price of peace is the willingness to make war. Sometimes the cost of mercy is the courage to be merciless. Sometimes saving civilization requires refusing to be civilized. The humans had taught them that. The humans had paid that price. The galaxy would never forget.